When I read that meditation, and I first thought of, and I don't know if any of you had, grew up and your parent might say, eat your liver, eat the liver on the plate. And the only thing, some of you like liver, flies like liver, I'm sure. But I did not think liver was that great, okay? But it's interesting how we look at life and truth and where it lies in for us. So at our Easter Sunday service, the Sermon on Death and Resurrection of Truth, we explored how we as Unitarian Universalists fit in today's paradigm of the power structure, specifically our counterweight to falsehoods being promulgated and how we express truth in the world. I want to give you a recent example since that sermon. Pete Hegseth, our Secretary of Defense, now called the Secretary of War, made the following comments. He described the American media as, quote, incredibly unpatriotic. And he went on and said, I just can't help but notice the endless stream of garbage, the relentless negative coverage you cannot resist peddling, despite the historic and important success of this effort and the success of our troops, referring to the Iran war. And then he said, sometimes it's hard to figure out what side some of you are actually on. And Mr. Gruskin, who's a former editor of the Miami Herald, the Wall Street Journal, and the Bloomberg News, responded in an article, and he said, quote, ideally, reporters are on the side of truth. Go figure. And he goes on to say, and see their role as providing the most accurate, complete, and transparent account of what's happening on the ground. Imagine that, the side of truth. Wouldn't that be a good example? So I asked us to face reality here and really put the question out, do we have a counterweight against powerful forces? If you counted us all in the room, and Zoom, and Fernandina Beach, we're going to get to 168 members. There's a lot more Unitarian Universalists out there, right? They just don't come here. And so what we found out is that over the past few years, even a group as powerful as the press have a tough time against a powerful flow of lies. The press are in a particularly vulnerable time over these past years because print media is nearing the end of existence and being held on. The Pittsburgh newspaper just got bought by a nonprofit, which kind of tells you where media is these days. They're definitely nonprofit. Mainstream TV, for example, is on the wane, and people go to social media, which can be a trove of lies as well as truths. The term false news has been used relentlessly against the press, to the point that the public's confidence in the press is about equal to their confidence in Congress, which is very low. And if someone makes a mistake in the press, it just confirms the rhetoric against false news. So, do we even stand a chance as we preach a gospel of truth in our community, not to mention a gospel of truth to the nations? The simple answer is yes, and I'm going to tell you why, but I think you already know. We talked about the metaphor of the seesaw, right? In a seesaw, if you are heavy, you're going to be at the bottom. If you're light, you're going to be at the top. And you're not going to get it down unless the person lets you down, right? Well, not necessarily. So we talked about the lesson. One, those in power don't give up voluntarily. But two, those in power can be worn down. Remember, the person on top can be screaming, talking, driving the other person crazy until they let them down. And also, the person on top can jump off. It's not comfortable. You might twist your ankle, but for the most part, you don't get killed these days for disagreeing. It demonstrates the freedom that we have as a small group. Now, the fourth is the person on top can get allies that can either pull them down and help them to get off the seesaw. In other words, they can change the counterbalance. As we saw, this is what happened in Minneapolis when the group of people gathered and nationwide protests gathered. It did make a change, reluctantly, but it made a change in government policy. It was a great sacrifice, including the death of 2 individuals and the injuring of others and the arrests of more. Thich Nhat Hanh said before he died that the next Buddha will be a Sangha, not necessarily a person. And I think that in Buddhist terminology is a very interesting idea. The practice of believers, a community of practitioners. The idea that individuals do lead, but we're not looking for a savior. We, as a group of people, need to do that. And as he said, not through war or violence, but through caregiving for each other. Caregiving and confronting those who want to do us harm. So we're not powerless. We are called by the universe, God, higher being, or just our planet Earth, to speak truth and to lead. As Unitarian minister Edward Hale said almost 200 years ago, it still rings true today, that I will not refuse to do the something I can do. It's very powerful. It's been used by other people. Another one of his poems simply said, look up and not down, look out and not in, look forward and not back, lend a hand. And finally, again, nearly 200 years ago, he said, quote, can it be possible that all human sympathies can thrive, that all human powers can be exercised, and all human joys increase, if we live all our might with the 30 or 40 people next to us, telegraphing kindly to all other people, to be sure. Margaret Mead said it succinctly, never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. So that small group of committed citizens represents us. It's who we are. And we want to change the world for positive. That's why we're here on Sunday. We're here for community, but we're here for reinforcement. So the movement for truth, for integrity, the movement of the Sangha is a movement of us. Change can be simple, can be complex, but it's never outside of our reach. I've asked Linda Plummer to share her thoughts on how we, a normal, if that's a word we can use, a normal Unitarian Universalist in everyday life can affect positive change in our world. Please welcome Linda Plummer.
Thank you. I was struck by the fact that we were talking about in times like these, because really we all know, as you use, that the times like these have been in the past and they will be in the future. It's about the differences and the feelings that that brings out in people. And I was thinking about when Mick was in high school, we had this idea to come up with a social change through music program that we marketed to businesses for Take Your Children to Work Day. And we had 2 big businesses hire us to do our program. And I did like Helen Reddy and had these kids sing, I Am Woman. And then Mick would do an Annie DeFranco song and have them do that. But one of the big banks, the HR director said, well, I've talked to the CEO and, we want to have the program, but his twins are going to be in the program and he doesn't want you turning them into social activists. And I'm thinking, and what would be wrong with that? But I said, I assure you the twins are going to be fine. So, Mick, I'm really delighted to be sharing a podium with you again 20 years later. Okay, so first I'm going to talk about a few examples at work, and then I have more examples in our personal life. And I'm really focused on ways of change in our individual interactions. We all know to vote and call our congressman or congresswoman and all of that, but individual. So one of the things in work, I'm a human resources consultant. I provide HR for 3 small companies. And one of them, our crew, go out and do a construction kind of niche job around the South. All of them Spanish is their first language. And so at a recent meeting with the owner and the foreman, I said, I'd like us to talk about what we're going to do if anyone is approached by ICE on our crew. I want to be sure that all of us are safe, all of you are safe. And the owner immediately said, well, that's not going to happen, they're all legal. And I said, well, our people are exactly the kind of people they're going after, and they have arrested people who are legal. So we need to be proactive, and we need to be sure that we're all calm and figure out what we're going to do. So she was like, I just can't believe it. And then both foremen sheepishly said, Linda's right. We've really been worried. Let's talk about it. So we figured it out, and I loved the owner. She immediately was like, I have an attorney on speed call, and you let Linda and me know that this has happened, and we'll get the attorney on it, and we'll deal with it. So after the meeting was over, then she and I had a wonderful discussion about profiling and what was going on with ICE. But she just has a very busy life, owning a business and running it, and wasn't aware of it. And then another example in business, one of my other businesses, they'd invited me to a one-day team building run by an outside consultant, and the next day the general manager and I were meeting, and he said, you made some comments yesterday that made me think, I think we are on the complete opposite of the political spectrum. And I told him where I stand, and he told me where he stood, and then I said, I would love, do you have a few minutes? I would love to hear what has you, on that position, because, I honestly don't get it. So I respect you. I mean, you're a really bright guy. Please, could you just explain to me why you see it this way? And it was really helpful for me, and then he listened to me, and we talked for about 30 minutes, and we've talked another time since then. I mean, we just have this great ability to talk back and forth and share perspectives. So those are a couple of examples at work. In the personal, one of the things that I like to do, this is a small thing and it's really easy to do, but I really consciously watch for people that I think may be marginalized. And in the grocery store is my favorite place. So it might be somebody who is older and they may be kind of invisible in our society, or may have a physical disability. But I like to offer a positive comment and a smile and compliment something they're wearing, a piece of jewelry, a child who's cute, a nice smile, something like that. And people just light up, because we don't spend much time saying something positive to someone else. And last week, Suzanne McKelvey and I were at Town Center, and we were walking along, and she saw a woman, we were walking along, and she said, your dress is great. And we all know Suzanne is our style maven. So that woman just oh, you like it? I mean, I hadn't thought about complimenting somebody that I'm just passing on the street. So just, consciously looking for things that we can say positive to other people. And then where we live, I live in a very conservative neighborhood. And I was in the fitness center working out, and one of the men that's always there the same time I am came in and said, oh, my friend has invited me to this thing called Porch Fest in Springfield. And then he had some pretty derogatory comments to make. And there were several people who heard it, and I said, wow, your friend is really nice to offer to take you to Porch Fest. I've been there, and it's a great experience. And so then I shared what Porch Fest is, and I said, you really ought to go. I mean, it is really fun. And then I followed up with him the next week and said, did you go? And he said, yes. I said, well, how was it? So it was a chance for him to expand and change his view of what he thought Springfield was. A lot of people in my neighborhood have moved here from other places, and they're rather afraid of going downtown. They're afraid of going west of the Intercoastal, or whatever the river's called, St. John's. They're really afraid, so I delight in finding things to take them to show it's fine, it's fine. Another example in water aerobics, one of the women was sharing that she and her college-age son were in Chicago, and she'd gone back to the hotel, but he'd been out drinking, and he was on his way back, and he chose to relieve himself by the side of a building. A Chicago police officer escorted him back to the hotel, and she woke up, and there was an officer and her son saying, is this your son? So she's sharing the story at water aerobics with about 20 women in the pool. And so I said, I'm really glad that worked out for you and your son. But I just want to point out to everyone that is a perfect example of white privilege. If that young man had been any other race, I would bet money that he would have gone to jail. He would not have been escorted to his mother's very nice hotel to find out, does he really belong to his mother in the hotel? Just want to point out that that's exactly what white privilege is all about. And I'm kind of known later, one of the women at Aerobics said, you know, you always have an interesting perspective on things. But I still keep speaking up. Another thing is book clubs are really popular, and we have one in my neighborhood. We actually have 3. We all read the same book, but we meet, there's so many people. So I always look at what are the books for the year, and I select the book that has the most themes around difference, whether it's sexual orientation or race relations or something like that. And I always volunteer to facilitate that book. So they're like, you're volunteering for March and it's only October? Yep, that's the book that I want. And I have a reputation. People love coming to my book discussions because they go, you really stretch our minds. And I ask the questions and in a safe way, get people talking about it. And then on the Springfield home tour, I saw Rethreaded for the first time. I never knew what they were about. It's a wonderful program to support the survivors of human trafficking. So I had this idea. I figured out with the executive director there, I said, what is the one book about human trafficking that's based in the United States? Because I want to have our book club read it, but I don't want it to be about some other country because I don't want them saying, well, that's there, it doesn't happen in the US. I want it in the US. And so she gave me the book, and so what I did is I offered to, as an extra book for the year, I offered to host and facilitate the discussion on the book. We had 20 women show up on a Wednesday, and then on Friday I had arranged that we went to Rethreaded. The executive director met with us for an hour. She loved it because, my gosh, these women really knew a lot about human trafficking. I mean, we had a really deep, rich discussion about it. And then they shopped in the store, and then I took them to a Springfield restaurant so they could see there was this really nice restaurant in Springfield. And people were asking me how to get there. I'm like, just go down the Main Street Bridge and take a right, and it's right here. You too can come back and give your support to this restaurant. And when we take one action, then you never know where the ripples are. And from that, getting those women exposed to the human trafficking of the work of Rethreaded, we've had 2 T-shirt drives in our neighborhood where we're donating T-shirts that are made into jewelry and products that they sell to support the programs. And the women's club in our neighborhood, they give money every year to a nonprofit, and they said, we want to give money to Rethreaded, so they received a very generous gift. And then this year, they're supporting a different group that's supporting human trafficking survivors. And that's really all because of the awareness. I mean, so many women came up to me and said, we had no idea that this was so prevalent, especially in Florida. Florida is one of the biggest states for human trafficking. So one action, you just never know the ripples of where it will go. And some of the techniques around this, there's a technique called the ouch. And I use that sometimes. And I was thinking of when I was at the Mountain, and the Mountain is a Unitarian Universalist conference center in Highlands, North Carolina. And there's a man sitting across from me. I didn't know him. He went up to make an announcement, and the speakerphone, the lunchroom was packed. And he made a derogatory comment about one of the political parties. And he came back and he sat down, and I looked at him and I said, I just have to say that one of your comments was really an ouch for me. And I'd like to tell you why. And he said, what? And I said, you know, that comment about the political party, you know, there is a large wedding, private wedding here, and they're staying here for the weekend. I mean, it's a lot of money to the Mountain. And I absolutely guarantee you that some of their guests are of different political persuasions. Plus, we can't assume that all Unitarian Universalists think the same way. I mean, we have people who represent both parties. So that was really an ouch for me, and I want the Mountain to be a welcoming place for all people. And he said, you're right. He said, I shouldn't have said it. Thank you for bringing it to my attention. So the ouch technique is something that can get you into that conversation. And another a technique is assuming good intentions and just explaining the impact on others. Broadening, it's really about broadening people's perspective. And that's what I was doing with white privilege comment in the pool. I just wanted the women to understand Yeah, if it had been a different mother and son, they could have had a very different outcome. So it's just broadening the view of the world. And so wrapping this up, if we could just pause, listen, and choose even one sentence that opens the conversation instead of closes it. Tell me more. Help me understand how you see it this way. That comment is an ouch for me. Then we can begin to change the conversation. And when we have enough people doing that, we begin to change each other, and that's the power of our community.